Okay. Hello. My name is Christina. Thank you for coming in today, Stephanie.
No problem.
So I wanted to go over some confidentiality with you.
Okay.
And just be really open about that whatever we discuss will be kept solely between you and I. However, I'm a mandated reporter, so in the event that you ever do mention self-harm, harm of others, I do have to share that information with my supervisor.
Okay.
Also, if for whatever reason your records are subpoenaed by the courts, I do have to turn that over as well.
Okay.
So with your consent, if that is okay, then we can continue this session.
I agree.
Okay, great. So why don't you tell me how I can be of use to you?
So I'm here because I've just been having a really rough time. I had a job and I was let go from that job due to me being, I feel like, partial blame or maybe all the blame. So yeah.
Go on, tell me more about that.
Okay. I used to work at a bank for about 5 years, and I was really dedicated to this job. I woke up every morning and I loved going to this job. And there was a promotion that was supposed to be coming for somebody who, was doing stellar. And I felt like I was the one who should have gotten it. I would come in extra early. I was the first one in and I was the last one out. And I was putting in a lot of overtime and I was just putting in a lot of extra work to prove myself to not only my colleagues but my boss. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people wanted the promotion as well, but I felt like I was putting in the work, so I felt like I earned it. And me and my boss did have several conversations where he did state that, he see the extra work that I'm putting in, and I do deserve a promotion. So in my head, I kind of felt like, hey, maybe this promotion is gonna go to me. And come to find out, I didn't get it. It actually went to another colleague, and I was distraught.
Okay. So you've been working at a bank.
Yes.
And you've been working overtime, putting in hours, going above and beyond, and you feel as though your efforts haven't really paid off in your workplace.
Exactly. I just kind of feel like everything that I was doing to prove myself, it's like it went unnoticed. And, this other person that the promotion went to, their work ethic is good, but I don't feel like it was as good as mine. And I don't feel like they put in as much effort and time as I did. And I was a little confused on how I was passed over on the promotion and it went to this other person. Like, what were they doing that I wasn't? And I went downhill after that.
Okay. So this other person, they got the job over you, and you feel as though they didn't deserve it because their work ethic doesn't align with your work ethic. Okay. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about you being distraught?
So once I found out that the promotion was passed over from me, I didn't get it and it went to someone else, I went into, I want to say, a depression. I started to go home and drink, and I'm not a drinker, but it went from having 1 glass to 2 glasses, and it exceeded to the point where I was staying up to 3, 4, 5 in the morning drinking, and then I would go to work that way. And that behavior kind of like affected my work ethic. So I was showing up for work in the beginning, and then it started with me being late to work. You know, I was spoken to from my boss, and they, you know, was just asking me, was everything okay? And I would lie and say yes. And then it would go to me, you know, missing out on a couple days, like a no-show, no call, no show. And they spoke to me about that, and I said I would tighten up, you know, I would get it together. And then I just couldn't. I couldn't, and it led to me being fired, unfortunately. And it me not being able to come to work on time, and me not being able to come to work on time, or me not showing up for work when I was supposed to, led to me eventually getting fired, unfortunately.
Okay. So you were let go because you started to fall behind on your responsibilities with work, being on time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, you know, not getting this job promotion that you know you deserve must have made you feel on some level rejected.
I felt.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I felt very rejected. I just kind of felt like I was alone, and I guess because I was working as hard as I was and putting in all those extra hours, you know, some was paid, some not was paid, just to be able to prove myself, and then for the position to get passed over to someone else, you know, I was just kind of like, what the hell is going on, you know? And although I now that I think about it, I feel like once I started drinking and, you know, it started affecting my work, I feel like my boss had an idea that something was going on, but because every time they asked me, I would just lie and say I was okay, everything was okay. I kind of isolated myself instead of expressing or telling them the truth at the moment. I felt like maybe if I did, things would have ended differently.
Okay. So would you say that this is the first time where you've experienced rejection, that it's had some sort of negative reaction, that it's impacted you on a level where you would lose your job?
I mean, it's not the first time that I have faced rejection. It's happened throughout my whole life, you know, from when I was little up until my adulthood.
Okay. Why don't you tell me about like an event before the age of 10 that's really significant to you in your life, and what happened?
Okay. So let me think. Before the age of 10, this event I specifically remember was with my dad. And I remember my brothers wanted these specific kind of like shoes. And my dad and my mom, you know, they said, you know, we can't really afford, because if we buy one, you know, we have to buy all. And, you know, I feel like personally my dad really thought these shoes were really cool, and I feel like he really wanted my brothers to have them. Mm-hmm. And because they didn't have the money for it, you know, my dad turned around and looked at me and said, you know, things would be a lot easier if you weren't here. And I remember, you know, that just piercing me. Like, I just felt like my heart was just stomped on.
So if you can actually like replay that entire scene in your mind and actually freeze a frame, which frame would you freeze?
The part where he said, where he looked at me and said it would be easier if you weren't here.
Why? Because
I felt like that statement in itself was devastating to say to not only a child, but your child, you know, like it's almost as if I felt like my life had no value, you know, and materialistic things were valued over an actual human being's life. All because my brothers weren't able to get the shoes that they wanted or that they thought were really cool. You know, I thought I was really hurt by that comment. I was crushed.
Why don't you tell me another event? Before the age of 10.
There was another time where my dad had took us to Toys R Us. And of course, as kids, you see all these toys that you want. And I specifically remember I wanted this Barbie doll. It was like this Barbie doll that you were able to like pull the string back, and once you let it go, it flies in the air. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that doll so bad. Mm-hmm. And I asked my dad, like, you know, can you get me this doll? And he said no, because your brothers want these wrestling figures, and I'm gonna get it for them. So you have to wait until next time. And in my head, I just couldn't understand, like, why do I have to wait? You know, but they get to have toys now. And, you know, I just remember feeling sad and disappointed. And, you know, my brothers got their action figures, and I left with nothing. I returned back home with nothing.
So if you, again, were able to freeze a frame in that scenario, which frame would you freeze?
The fact when my dad told me no, and that I had to wait to get my toy.
Why? Because
as a child, I don't feel like I was able to comprehend why I had to wait, because he never gave me an explanation as to why I had to wait. So he just told me, no, you know, like, your brothers want these action figures, and I'm gonna get it for them, so you have to wait. There was never any explanation as to why. And you know, I never got that toy either. So I was just always stuck with that memory and that feeling of hurt and pain.
So you have two memories right now, that basically have the similar story, where your brothers are being looked at before you. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of has a theme of you feeling rejected.
Yes.
Why don't you tell me one more story, significant story, and before the age of 10, and tell me what happened.
Okay. There was a time I was with my mom, and I remember my mom telling me, like, she had to go somewhere, and I remember asking her if I could go with her. Mm-hmm. And she said no. And I remember her saying, you know, the place where I'm going is not for kids. She didn't explain where she was going, or she didn't explain why it wasn't for kids. So I literally started crying, and I remember throwing myself on the floor, and I was holding on to the bottom of her ankle, like trying to keep her from leaving. And I remember her screaming for my dad to come and get me, and he just like snatched me up off of her, and she left. And I thought I would never see my mom again. I thought I just didn't understand where was she going and why I couldn't go. You know, it wasn't really explained to me. So I thought she was leaving me.
And where would you freeze that frame?
If I could freeze that frame, I would probably freeze it when I was on the floor, crying and holding on to the bottom of her ankle.
Why?
That frame is significant to me because I was physically trying to hold on for dear life in a child's head, in my child's head. Mm-hmm. I was trying to physically hold on to what I was close to, what I known as my mom. And I literally thought that I was going to lose her forever. You know, her just leaving without saying where she was going or why I couldn't go. I thought I would never see her again. And I was afraid.
So, thank you for sharing those 3 stories with me.
No problem.
So it seems like your 3 stories have a common theme of rejection.
Yeah.
And at the same time, well, I wouldn't say at the same time, and also your need or want for recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Also, sort of like how you didn't get the same recognition at your bank job.
Right.
And you also mentioned a lot about your mom and your dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your family.
Okay.
Why don't you tell me what is the relationship like with your father?
It's a tough one. My dad is not the most affectionate person. Growing up, he, I would say, was more of the macho type, so showing affection was like a no-no for him. And I just remember him drinking. I remember anytime something was hard or he was going through something, I'm guessing emotionally, he would resort to drinking. And I'm guessing, you know, looking back on it now, I'm guessing that was his coping mechanism. And he would just drink and drink and drink. And, you know, some nights were okay. He would drink himself to sleep. And other nights it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Would you say you were close with him?
As a child, no. I was not close with him.
Okay. So, why don't you, so, I'm sorry, so you mentioned that your father had a drinking problem growing up.
Yes.
And, he was an unaffectionate man,
Mm-hmm.
because of, machismo, masculinity sort of thing.
Right.
And you weren't entirely close with him.
Right.
And also, based on the stories that you mentioned to me before, he also didn't really see you,
Mm-hmm.
and also didn't really value you by when he told you, I wish that you weren't even here.
Right.
So, why don't you tell me about your relationship with your mom?
Okay. My mom was more affectionate.
Mm-hmm.
That I can say. I do feel like I felt like my mom felt obligated to be more affectionate because she was trying to, I guess, make up for where my dad lacked.
Mm-hmm.
So there were times where I questioned whether the affection that I got from my mom was genuine, or was it out of guilt because she stayed with a man, my dad, who wasn't really affectionate with his kids, you know? And she never really commented on it or asked me how I felt when it came to that, when it came to my dad not being affectionate to me. She would just, you know, try to show me, I guess, as much affectionate as she could to make up for where my father lacked. So, I mean, that's one thing. And I can say my mom, she was kind of fun. She had her moments when she liked to joke around and play, and she had her moments when she was really serious and, you know, like not in the mood. And, you know, when she was that way, I remember she never really explained why. And I'm guessing as a child I liked explanation, but I'm guessing as an adult, maybe you feel like, you know, from an adult's point of view to a child, I don't owe you an explanation as to why I'm angry or why I'm upset. You just do what I say when I say it and how I say it, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's how that was with my mom when I was younger.
So I want to go back to what you said about your mom. You said that you felt that you weren't sure if she was genuine
Right.
or not, or if it was based on guilt,
Right.
based on the actions of your father by her staying with him because he was unaffectionate.
Yeah.
What makes you say that? What makes you question whether her affection was genuine or not?
Because I felt like the times where she would visibly see, or she was present to see, like my dad may not show me affection when I went to like run over and give him a hug or something like that, and he just kind of like pushed, like nudge me off, like she would just kind of like look and be like, well, come over here and give mommy a hug, but I never felt like it was genuine. I just kind of felt like she was doing it because she just saw my dad reject me. So instead of addressing him, she never addressed him when he did those type of things. She would just try to like make up for it, like, oh, well, why don't you come over here and give mommy a hug, But times when she didn't see that, she would not ask me, like she wouldn't be affectionate to me. Like she wouldn't say, oh, why don't you come and give mommy a hug? It was just neutral, I guess.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you have siblings. How many siblings do you have?
I have 2 brothers, 2 older brothers.
Okay. Why don't you tell me about your relationship with, what are their names?
Timothy and Troy.
Okay. Why don't you tell me about your relationship with Timothy?
He is the middle child, and he's what I consider a little man. Well, what I used to consider as a child a little man. I felt like him and my brother were more so the favorites, more so from my dad, because I'm guessing they were boys and I was a girl. So I felt like we were treated very differently, Timothy and I. Anything that he wanted, he got. Anything that I wanted, it was either I didn't get it, couldn't get it, or I had to wait. And like I said, nothing was ever really explained to me, like why. It was just, you have to wait. And that's what it was. So the attention and affection was different from me and Timothy when it came to like my dad and my mom, so Timothy was also asthmatic. So there was a lot of like attention and affection and coddling with him, as opposed to me. I didn't have any like health issues or anything like that. So I just kind of felt like my parents felt were like, oh, she's the strong one. And I felt like they took that literal, like mentally and emotionally, even as a child. So a lot of things that Timothy and my other brother got, I just didn't get.
Are you the youngest or the oldest?
I am the youngest.
The youngest, okay. So why don't you tell me about your relationship with Troy?
Troy is the oldest brother. He does have a disability. So he's automatically like, I want to say the favorite between my mom and my dad. He is like head person in charge. They wait on him hand and foot. They do everything for him, although he can do things for himself. They do everything for him. They give him everything he wants, and it's always been that way since we were children. So him and I don't want to say that we're not close, but we're not like the best of brother and sister either.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So you shared a lot of information with me. So it looks like your relationship with your father isn't as close as maybe you would want it to be.
Right.
You feel that your brothers are favored over you. Your mom, you do have a closer relationship than you do with your dad. However, you do question whether the times that she is affectionate with you, if it's genuine or not.
Yeah.
Also, the stories that you shared with me, it shares a huge theme on feeling rejected, feeling invisible, feeling as though you're not good enough, worthy, capable of being seen,
Right.
which is now also playing a big part in your current life
Right.
because it's affected your job.
Right.
So when you were at the bank, you were going above and beyond, you were putting in the work, your work ethic was great, and you were still not seen, you were still invisible, the same way your dad and your mom had treated you.
Right.
And now because of it, because you didn't get the promotion that you were hoping for, it's affected your work ethic, you coming in on time, and eventually leading to you being let go.
Right.
Which now you're currently struggling with rejection again, and coping with alcohol the
Right.
same way your father did
Yes.
when you were younger.
Yeah.
So unfortunately our session is ending. However, for our next session, I do want to sort of work towards solutions to sort of getting you back on your feet and in a place that is comfortable and at peace and helpful for you.
Okay.
So when you go home
Okay.
and you're ever feeling sad or down about being let go, and you want to pick up the alcohol, so as homework for you,
Okay.
I want you just to have some sort of different coping mechanism, one that can possibly help you avoid alcohol.
Okay.
I want you to raise your right hand for me. Keep your eyes closed and think of a really happy place, something that happened to you before that feels really good. And let me know when you have it.
I have it.
Okay. So I'm going to take your thumb, and this will be your happy button.
Okay.
Now, I want you to raise your left hand and close your eyes and think of really sad, bad event that happened, past or present. And let me know when you have it.
I have it.
Okay. I'm going to take your thumb, and this will be your sad, unhappy. I'm going to grab the alcohol button.
Okay.
Okay. So when you go home, moments where you're feeling rejected or sad, I want you to either choose the happy button
Okay.
or the sad, depressive button.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what you chose and why and explore that more next week.
Okay.
So it was really nice having you come in. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, no problem.
Bye.
Have a good day.